What's going on, guys? The Comics Kid 2099 here. Welcome to day 344 of the 365-day graphic novel review challenge. If you watched the last couple of days of videos, you know that I sound a little bit sick right now, but you can just pretend like I'm doing the Batman voice, and since I am talking about a Batman book today, that is entirely appropriate. Today, I'm going to be talking about Batman Elseworlds Volume 1. This is a very huge collection of Elseworlds stories, mostly from the 1990s. Elseworlds are the stories where they take a character from the DC Universe and they put them in a strange and unusual scenario or surroundings to create a new and fresh situation where that character can feel new, I guess. I could just read the motto here. In Elseworlds, heroes are taken from their usual settings and put into strange times and places, some that have existed or might have existed, and others that can't, couldn't, or shouldn't exist. The result, stories that make characters who are as familiar as yesterday seem as fresh as tomorrow. So that's the premise of Elseworlds. We have a wide variety of stories here, and a wide variety of quality to these stories. Some of them are very good, some of them are not very good. So I'm just going to start from the beginning here. The first story here is called Holy Terror. It is drawn by, actually I don't know who it was drawn by. It was collected in the Alan Brenner Tales of the Batman book that I talked about a few days ago, and basically the premise of that one is that Gotham City in the world is kind of a theocracy, and Bruce Wayne is a priest in the Catholic Church, but as Batman, he is trying to unearth the corruption in the church, trying to figure out what caused the death of his parents. It wasn't just a random killing, I guess you could say. And that one's okay. Towards the middle and to the very end, it kind of stops feeling like a Batman book, and it kind of starts to feel more like a Justice League book. That was a little weird. I felt like it lost its focus a little bit about halfway in, where Batman is discovering all this stuff that the church is involved with, and I feel like it either needed to be longer, or it needed to just trim itself down even further so that it could be more of a Batman book, and not Batman meeting the Flash, and meeting this world's version of Superman, and then this world's version of different characters from the DC Universe. I feel like it kind of lost its focus a little bit there. The next story here is a story called The Blue, the Bat, and the Gray, or something like that. The Blue, the Gray, and the Bat. And that is a story where Batman is an agent of Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War. That one's okay. I do wish that we had a little bit more DC Universe stuff in that story. We have a Civil War version of Batman and a Civil War version of Robin, and other than that, we get a whole lot of real-world cameos in this book. Abraham Lincoln shows up at the beginning, and we have Samuel Clemens, we have Wild Bill Hickok. I wish we could have had a Wild West version of Two-Face, or the Joker, or Catwoman. Catwoman would have been great. I think that she would have fit right in this kind of story. I wish we could have had more DC Universe stuff there. That's the kind of thing that I want to see whenever I read a What If or an Elseworld. I want to see some of these characters that are familiar to us most of the time, and we get to see them turned on their head and something incredibly different done with them. Then there's Dark Joker the Wild, which I talked about yesterday, so won't talk about that anymore. Then we have Robin 3000. That story is probably the worst one of the book. I was going into it really excited because it's basically Batman meets Flash Gordon. You have aliens who have kind of sort of taken over to Earth. Technically, humans can still do whatever they want, but the aliens are unofficially in charge of the Earth, and then they will silence anybody who, in the slightest way, will try to protest the aliens and their rule. And Bruce Wayne, his descendant, actually he has two descendants here. One of them is like Bruce Wayne the 20th, and then his nephew is Thomas Wayne the whatever. And then Batman dies at the beginning of the story. Not a big spoiler because it's in like the first 3 pages of the story. And then the rest of this 2-issue prestige format miniseries is Thomas Wayne the whatever trying to bring this war to the alien overlords. And it is so slow and so boring. You would not think that taking Batman and Flash Gordon and smushing them together and adding even more robots and laser guns than what you would normally have would create a boring story, but it does. I don't understand how this story is as boring as it is. It is such a slog to get through that, and I have spent years wanting to read that story. Long before DC put this trade paperback collection together, I remember seeing that there was a Robin 3000 miniseries, a 2-issue miniseries, and I remember being really excited about that, and I wanted to read it, and I was so disappointed by this. It doesn't even conclude anything. By the end of this miniseries, all the subplots that it introduces in these 2 issues are just kind of left in the air. At the the end, it's basically, okay, we're going to fight this war against the aliens. Nothing is resolved. It doesn't feel like much of a story. It feels like a setup for an ongoing series, like a backdoor pilot for something that never actually took off the ground. And that makes it even more disappointing, I think. Then after that, we get a story where Batman teams up with Harry Houdini. That one is called The Devil's Workshop. And I like that one, but I wanted more of it. I wanted to see more of Harry Houdini on his own. I wanted to see more of Batman on his own. And then I wanted to see more of them teaming up together. I really would have liked for this to have been as long as, say, Batman Year One. In that story, we had James Gordon slowly realizing that the Batman was not the enemy that he thought he was. He starts off hunting the Batman, and then by the end, he's working with the Batman. That's kind of the situation that we get here in The Devil's Workshop, where Harry Houdini, at first, he wants to prove that the Batman is a fraud, because that's something that Harry Houdini did when he was alive in real life. He would go to these various mystics and fortune tellers and mediums, and then he would prove that they were actually frauds. He wanted to do the same thing with the Batman, and then by the end of the story, they're working together. I just wanted to see more of that. I wanted to see more of Harry Houdini doing detective work and then discovering who the Batman was. It basically all happens way too fast for my taste. I like the story. I just wanted to see more of it. Then we get a story that is basically a mashup between Batman and a story Frankenstein. And that one is, at times, I feel like, okay, that's something that Batman would do. And then at times, I'm thinking, okay, that's something that Dr. Frankenstein would do. But these characters are not very similar. So it's really weird trying to mash these two together and make it feel like a Batman story, but also make it recognizable as a Frankenstein spoof. So it's really weird trying to see them walk that line. It's very thin. And I talked yesterday about how even in an Elseworlds story, I still want a Batman story to feel like a Batman story. So I can't fault them for trying to make this feel a little bit like a Batman story, but it just feels weird whenever you've got Frankenstein stuff here that feels a little bit like Frankenstein, but not fully like Frankenstein because it's got a lot of Batman in it, and it doesn't feel fully like Batman because it's got a lot of Frankenstein in it. I understand that's the premise of this story. It just feels weird to me. I'm not a huge fan of Frankenstein. I've never read the novel. I read a condensed version of it when I was a kid, but I've never read the full novel. It's not something I will probably ever do. So if you're a huge fan of Frankenstein, I don't know if you would enjoy this because you got a lot of Batman elements there that you might not want in this story. And if you're a huge Batman fan, but you don't really care about Frankenstein, I don't know if you'd like the story because it's got a lot of Frankenstein stuff in there too. So it's really weird. Also, like 80% of that issue is a flashback. It's really clunky the way that that story is paced. I wish that they could have just restructured it a little bit. So we start when Bruce is a little kid instead of starting with him as an adult and then kind of clumsily going into this flashback. I didn't like the way that that was handled. The way it was here, I couldn't tell when we were in flashback and when we weren't. Yes, at one point we see Bruce when he's a little kid, but then most of the flashback is him as an adult, and he looks exactly the same as he did in the present day where we started the story. So that was a little bit frustrating. I feel like it could have been paced a little bit better. Then we get a story where Bruce Wayne becomes the Green Lantern of Sector 2814, and that's possibly my favorite story here. I really like this one quite a bit. It starts off with Bruce becoming the Green Lantern. It's right in the middle of the events of Batman Year One. In fact, it uses a lot of that as backstory here, where the bat crashes through the window and it gives Bruce the idea of dressing up like a bat. Instead of a bat crashing through the window, Abin Sur's hologram shows up and says, hey, Bruce Wayne, you're the new Green Lantern of this sector. So he becomes the new Green Lantern, and then he, I guess, trains for a little while because then we see that Gordon is already a commissioner. So it's using elements of Year One, but it's also kind of playing around with it, which is fine because this is an Elseworlds story. But Gordon does not trust the Green Lantern. Then you've also got Harvey Dent there. He's a little bit more on the fence than Gordon is. Gordon is flat out against Green Lantern, especially having that much power and not having to answer to anybody. That's something that he says in the story. I like this up until a point. At one point, Bruce Wayne is called to depose Sinestro from his throne on Corrigar, which is his home world. And then after that, the story kind of takes a dive a little bit. After that, suddenly the book feels the need to combine different Green Lantern characters into Batman characters. So Sinestro, he gets his ring, and he comes to Earth and somehow figures out that Bruce Wayne is in Gotham, or rather the Green Lantern is in Gotham. He somehow finds that out, and then he goes and gives Jim Gordon a heart attack. He finds out that Joe Chill killed the Waynes, and then he absorbs all of Joe Chill's mind into his own mind. I don't know why he does that. He says he wants to find out why he did it. I don't know why he needs to find that out. And that kind of drives Sinestro crazy. Then he starts dressing up like the Joker. I poo you not, that's something that happens in this book. Sinestro is dressing up like the Joker, like his exact costume. He's got the big goofy grin. He's not dropped in a vat of chemicals, but other than that, he looks exactly like the Joker. It's not a good look for him. Then he randomly goes and grabs Selena Kyle and Harvey Dent. He burns off half of Harvey's face, turning him into Binary Star instead of Two-Face. Binary, it means two. We get it. And then Selena Kyle, she becomes the new Sapphire, Star Sapphire. I don't know why he grabs these two people in particular, other than they are Batman characters and we want to turn them into Green Lantern characters. I don't know why he burns off Harvey's face, other than he's crazy and we need to turn him into Two-Face. I don't really understand any of the points in the story where things like this happen. I don't really understand any of that. But anyway, then we get a really kind of clunky way of introducing the Justice League here, where the Guardians, they want Bruce Wayne to go out and patrol the rest of Sector 2814, and so Bruce Wayne isn't going to leave Earth because this is his home and he has to protect it. So the Guardians basically instate extra Green Lanterns on Earth in the form of Superman, the Flash, and Wonder Woman. That's a neat idea. I wish we could have seen more of this world. That's something that I keep finding myself saying with these Elseworlds stories. This reminded me a little bit of Red Sun, where we got to see a very good look at this world where Superman landed in Soviet Russia instead of in America, and then that changed everything about the DC Universe. All of the landscape was totally different. I kind of want to see that here. I want to see more of this world where Bruce Wayne became Green Lantern instead of a Batman character. I would have liked to have seen more of, okay, how does this affect Superman? Why does Superman seemingly not become Superman until after Batman here, even though traditionally Superman comes before Batman in the grand scheme of things? Different stuff like that. I would have liked to have seen, okay, how does this change everything? This is my favorite story in the book, and I wish we could have had more of it. I wish it could have been one of those longer Elseworld stories. And then this book closes off with a story called Dark Allegiances, I think, or Dark Alliances, and that was written and drawn by Howard Chaykin. I've mentioned before that I'm not a huge fan of Howard Chaykin's artwork, so I immediately clinched a little bit whenever I saw that this one was drawn by Howard Chaykin. The art is still not good. I still don't really like Howard Chaykin's art, but the writing here is not bad. I was expecting it to be really awful. He has done some stuff that I've just not liked at all. He did a Challengers of the Unknown book a long time ago, like back in the late 90s maybe, or maybe even earlier than that. That was one of the worst books that I've ever read. This was not that bad. Basically, Batman exists in the 1930s in a pre-World War II setting, and he is having to fight various fascists and neo-Nazis, or I guess they're just Nazis here. He's having to fight all that on American soil, and it strangely feels kind of topical for today's climate. I don't really get into politics a lot on this channel, but this story, I was reading it and I was thinking, like, is Howard Chaykin prescient? Is he able to see into the future? This is weird, just how much of this feels relevant today. And this was done like 20 years ago, when I bet when this came out, a lot of people were saying like, oh, this is very quaint. This is something that is very retro. It's taking place back in the 1930s. In a lot of ways, this feels like it could have been set in this day and age, and you wouldn't have to change a whole lot. You'd have to change like Adolf Hitler and Franklin Roosevelt, they show up here. You'd have to change that, but other than that, a lot of the smaller beats of the story wouldn't have to really change, and that's kind of impressive slash disappointing when you consider the way the world is today. But anyway, that story wasn't bad. It wasn't great. It wasn't my favorite story here, but it wasn't as bad as I was expecting it to be. So all in all, I think it's to be expected when you have a book like this that's this huge and it has this many people working on this many stories. Some of them are not going to be as good as others. It's not going to be consistently good or even consistently bad. You're going to have highs and you're going to have lows with a story like this, or with a book like this with many different stories. But I would recommend this because I love Elseworlds. I love the idea of we're going to do this particular corner of the DC universe and we're going to do it in an entirely different way than we usually do. I like that idea. I like the endless possibilities. I wish that DC did Elseworld stories today. They kind of sort of do every now and then. Way back a few years ago, they did this thing where different characters from the multiverse fought each other. There was Convergence, and then there was actually another one before that. So they still kind of do the alternate universe thing every now and then, but they don't do it like they used to. I miss the days when it was given that all the time you're going to have Elseworld stories. But anyway, I hope that you guys liked this video, and if you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will be back tomorrow with a different video. In the meantime, you guys have a great rest of your day. Catch you later. Where are the other drugs going?